Remember when the EPA came up with the initial version of that crazy proposition that suggests 2/3 of new cars should be all electric by 2032? Well, it's not gonna happen because all those EV enthusiasts finally had to face the facts and slow down with such imposing. The latest market trends go in the opposite direction. EV technology is immature, while there's also the UAW and its impact on the upcoming presidential elections. Stay with us as we present to you 6 reasons why Biden calls it quits on EVs and breaks under the pressure of reality. Number 6. New EPA rules. About a year ago, the EPA came up with its initial proposition of new tailpipe rules, which were expected to speed up the EV transition to the point where 2/3 of new vehicles would be all electric by 2032. The moment we saw that proposition, it was obvious it wasn't based on realistic presumptions. The projected growth was too optimistic, but the even more problematic aspect was new emissions requirements, which would be non-achievable by so many manufacturers, which would lead them to paying new fines and losing even more money than they already lose on EVs. Finally, the punch from reality came with this year's sales figures, so it became obvious that something needed to change. As a result, the Biden administration slashed the target for EV adoption significantly. Instead of the initially planned 67%, the new goal is for 35% of all new vehicles to be all electric by 2032. In other words, as many experts were suggesting, this transition will take way more time than politicians hoped for, even though some officials gave quite contradictory statements like Michael Reagan from EPA did. He said that despite the new rules, the goal remains the same, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly, but also emphasized that there's absolutely no mandate to adopt electric vehicles. In any case, the new rule cuts emissions by 49% by 2032 over 2026 levels, instead of the initially planned 56%. That may not seem like a big cut essentially, but it'll allow car makers to meet new standards without relying solely on electric vehicles, but embracing way more profitable hybrids as well. The EPA's EV targets are rather forecast than mandatory and go between 35 and 56% by 2032, which is a kind of flexibility that suggests that there could be further revisions of tailpipe rules with even lower EV adoption speed. Number 5. EV growth slows down significantly. One of the key reasons why this initial plan failed is the fact that the market has slowed down significantly. Even though the market still grows, it seems like it cooled down a lot. The problem is that the initial EPA proposal was based on the growth between 2020 and 2022 during the pandemic, where year-over-year ups were 90% or more. And after a couple of years of sales doubling up, things started to change. The creators of this plan completely neglected the fact that this was the phase of early adopters. The reason why the market was growing so fast was because of tech geeks and wealthy households who wanted to get a new piece of technology at any cost. Once they got their EVs, there wasn't much room left for further growth, because it was time for the middle class to act. And you know how things go when you're on a set budget. You have to make a rational choice, and at this very point, EVs are anything but that. They're still way more expensive than their gas-powered counterparts and don't give much in return. The outcome was kind of expected for everyone but the officials. The EPA was predicting a 70% growth in 2023, but last year ended with a 50% increase. An even bigger shock came when they got results from January 2024, which showed that the year-over-year growth was just 15%. Number 4. Immaturity of EV technology. If we're looking for reasons why EV growth is slowing down significantly, the most obvious one would be the fact that the current generation of EVs can't meet the demands of customers. As we already mentioned, the phase of early adopters is over, and the middle class has much higher criteria in terms of what they want for their money. According to the recent survey taken by Boston Consulting Group, which included 3,000 US consumers, nearly 40% said that they plan to to purchase an EV as their next vehicle. However, they also stated that they have pretty high requirements to make that transition. They want a 20-minute charging time, a 350-mile driving range, and a price of $50,000. That's where the problem with EV adoption begins, because if you look at the current offer on the market, there's only one electric vehicle that meets such criteria, the Hyundai Ioniq 6 rear-wheel drive, which only confirms the thesis that the current EV technology is still immature to be embraced by the masses. In other words, EVs are still not good enough, and the problem is in the approach EV makers took. They focused on luxury vehicles, on models that would be interesting to wealthy customers. They focused on blistering acceleration and opulence rather than affordability and practicality. And now, when the phase of early adopters is over, they don't have anything to offer to a common consumer, which leads to the conclusion that we are a generation or two away from EVs that are capable enough and affordable at the same time. Number 3. Automakers are losing money on EVs. According to the same study by Boston Consulting Group, automakers lose an average of $6,000 for every $50,000 electric vehicle they sell. To be honest, this study doesn't come as a big revelation. It's something we already knew. We knew long ago that car makers still haven't figured out how to make electric cars profitable. Sure, they invested billions in the development of new technologies, but there's also the matter of battery costs and the cost of raw materials, to be precise. Then there's the inability to optimize the production process, which all leads to a massive loss. Things went to the point that legacy car makers felt completely drained. They're forced to cancel or postpone their planned EV investments just to save capital. Just take Ford as an example. It's estimated that over the last year, the company has lost around $36,000 on every F-150 Lightning that they sold. The total EV losses are estimated around $5 billion, so the decision to delay $12 billion worth of EV investments planned for this year doesn't come as a surprise. As for the F-150 Lightning and its destiny, the planned production for 2024 has been cut by half, which affected around 1,400 workers. Other automakers are facing similar challenges. GM, for example, is also losing billions not just due to the production, but also because of significant quality issues it's facing at the moment. For these reasons, the company made the decision to move the production of all electric pickups, the Chevy Silverado EV and GMC Sierra EV, for 2025, while the production of the new electric drive unit planned for the first quarter won't start before the last quarter of this year. Number 2. Presidential Race. The upcoming presidential races seem closer than ever, and if you ask experts, most of them will tell you that the keys to the White House are in industrial states such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and of course, Michigan. And with the UAW publicly supporting Biden, it was obvious that the current administration would have to be very flexible with these rules and listen to the union, because the transition to EVs could potentially cost thousands of workers' jobs. Now with the new set of rules, the Detroit 3 has a moment of relief, especially if we consider the new regulations for heavy-duty pickups, which are some of the biggest moneymakers for all three. By 2032, heavy-duty pickups will be required to cut their emissions by less than half, and in practice, this means that they'll be allowed to pollute 3 times more than light-duty pickups and 4 times more than passenger cars, which will certainly help the 3 companies to avoid billions of dollars in fines, which seemed inevitable with the initial set of proposed rules. All this translates to a steady profit and more money for further developments, which consequently led to the rise of shares by up to 3.5% last week. Number 1. Hybrids are the next big thing. It turns out that once again, Akio Toyoda was right about EVs. The transition needs to go step by step, but many car makers tried to avoid that by jumping directly into EVs, neglecting hybrid technology. The government was pushing for the same thing, but now it's obvious that they were all wrong. The midterm future is in hybrids because they're cheaper and more convenient than the current generation of EVs. After all, the market says so, with gas-electric vehicles now accounting for nearly 9% of the market compared to EVs that account for less than 8%. While EV growth is slowing down, hybrids are growing at a much faster rate, and it'll grow even more in the future. Just consider that the new Camry is hybrid only and that the same is expected with the next generation RAV4. We're talking about two models that are sold in hundreds of thousands annually, so only these two have the potential to impact the market growth significantly. Logically, other car makers are going in the same direction, including Ford and GM, which wanted a quick EV transition at first, but now they're also announcing big plans for the hybridization of their lineups. Thanks for watching and see you next time.